Right now, there is a voice in your head reading these words. Maybe it sounds like you. Maybe it has a tone, a rhythm, a pace that feels completely natural. So natural, in fact, that you've probably never stopped to ask where it comes from. But here is what that voice never told you. Roughly 1 in 20 people have no voice at all, no narrator, no internal monologue, complete silence. And they function perfectly. They think, they feel, they make complex decisions. They just do it without the voice you've had your entire life. So the question isn't whether your inner voice exists. The question is, whose voice is it? And why do some people live without it and never miss it? Because the answer to that question goes somewhere most people are not prepared to go. Welcome, or welcome back, to Leaked Frequency. We explore the science of human experience, the things you've lived, felt, and wondered about, but never had a real explanation for. Let's get into it. Here is the thing nobody explains when they talk about the inner voice. We assume it belongs to us. We assume it is us. That voice narrating your day, rehearsing conversations, replaying memories. That's you, right? But neuroscience has been quietly building a case for something far stranger. And when we get there, the conclusion is going to change how you think about the word I. Let's start with what we actually know. The inner voice has a scientific name. Researchers call it inner speech. And for most of human history, we assumed everyone had it. It seemed so fundamental, so obviously part of being human, that nobody thought to question it. Then in 2011, a psychologist named Russell Hurlburt at the University of Nevada did something unusual. He gave people small beepers. Random times throughout the day, the beeper would go off. And participants had to stop and report exactly what was happening in their mind at that precise moment. Not what they were thinking about. What was actually occurring. The texture of the thought. What he found was not what anyone expected. Not only did the inner voice vary dramatically between people, in frequency, in clarity, in emotional tone, but a significant portion of participants reported something that stopped the research team completely. Silence. No voice. No words. No internal narrator of any kind. These were fully functioning, articulate, emotionally complex adults. And their inner world was, in the most literal sense, quiet. This condition, the absence of an internal monologue, is now sometimes linked to what researchers call aphantasia, the inability to generate voluntary mental imagery. People with aphantasia don't just lack the voice. They also can't picture a red apple when they close their eyes. They can't replay a memory as a visual scene. Their mind, when turned inward, produces something closer to a blank. And yet, here is what makes this genuinely strange. They don't experience this as a loss. Most people with aphantasia only discover it exists when someone else describes having a voice or seeing mental images. Until that moment, they assumed everyone's mind worked the way theirs did. Think about that. There are people walking around right now who have never heard a voice in their head, never seen a mental image, and they had no idea this made them different. Because from the inside, their experience felt completely normal. Which raises the first uncomfortable question. If the inner voice is so fundamental to human experience, why can so many people live without it and never notice it's gone? And here is where it gets strange. Because the answer isn't that the inner voice is optional. The answer is that what we call the inner voice might not be a single thing at all. Neuroscientists at University College London have identified at least 2 distinct systems involved in inner speech. The first is what they call the phonological loop, a kind of mental rehearsal space where language is processed and replayed. This is the system you use when you repeat a phone number to yourself before writing it down. The second system is something deeper, something that doesn't operate in words at all, when you have a feeling you can't quite name, when you sense that something is wrong before you can articulate why. When a decision feels right, even though you can't explain the reasoning, that is not the phonological loop. That is a different layer of cognition entirely. And researchers now believe that what most of us call our inner voice is actually the phonological loop narrating decisions that were already made somewhere else. Let that land for a moment. The voice in your head may not be making your decisions. It may be announcing them after the fact. This is not a new idea. In 1983, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted one of the most disturbing experiments in the history of consciousness research. He hooked participants up to brain monitoring equipment and asked them to flex their wrist whenever they felt like it, completely spontaneously. At the same time, he had them watch a clock and note the exact moment they felt the conscious urge to move. What he found shook the scientific community. The brain's electrical activity, the signal initiating the movement, began an average of 550 milliseconds before the participants' muscles moved. But the participants reported becoming consciously aware of their decision to move only about 200 milliseconds before the movement, which means the brain had already begun executing the decision nearly a third of a second before the person was consciously aware of deciding anything. The inner voice that said, "I'll move my wrist now," arrived late. The decision had already been made. Somewhere. By something operating below the level of conscious narration. And this is where we need to go deeper. Because if the inner voice is narrating decisions it didn't make, then what is it exactly? What is its function? Why does it exist at all? The most compelling answer comes from an unexpected direction: language. Developmental psychologist Lev Vygotsky, working in the early 20th century, long before brain imaging existed, proposed that inner speech is not something we are born with. It is something we learn. Watch a small child playing alone. They narrate everything out loud. Now I put the block here. Now this one goes on top. They are not talking to anyone. They are using language as a tool to organize their own thinking. Around age 7, this external narration gradually goes inward. The child stops speaking out loud and starts speaking silently. The voice that was once addressed to the world becomes addressed to the self. What we experience as the inner voice is, in Vygotsky's framework, internalized social speech. It is the voice of other people. Parents, teachers, caregivers. That we absorb so completely it now feels like our own. Think about that for a moment. The voice you've been treating as the most intimate, most personal part of yourself may have originated outside of you entirely. And this is the question I opened with, that I told you we would reach. Whose voice is it? Here is what the research actually suggests. The inner voice is not a unified self. It is a construction. A running commentary assembled from language patterns absorbed during childhood, shaped by every significant relationship you've ever had, filtered through the particular architecture of your individual brain. When the inner voice says, "I can't do this," that sentence has a history. It was spoken to you in some form by someone at some point. Your brain internalized it, filed it, and now retrieves it automatically in situations that pattern match to the original experience. You are not hearing yourself. You are hearing an echo. And people who have no inner voice, people with no phonological inner speech, they are not missing some essential part of themselves. They are simply not running that particular layer of processing. Their decisions get made. Their emotions get felt. Their identities remain intact. They just don't have the narrator, which raises the deepest question this topic leads to. If you remove the inner voice, if you silenced it completely, what would be left? Researchers studying meditation have been asking this question for decades. Advanced practitioners of certain contemplative traditions report that with enough training, the inner voice can be quieted, not suppressed, not distracted, genuinely stilled. And what they describe in that silence is not emptiness. They describe something they struggle to put into words, which is fitting, given that words are precisely what has gone quiet. An awareness that is present without being narrated. An experience that is full, even rich, but no longer organized around a central speaking self. Some neuroscientists, including Judson Brewer at Brown University's Mindfulness Center, have begun studying what happens in the default mode network during these states. The default mode network is the brain's resting system. The network most active when you are not focused on external tasks. It is, among other things, the network most associated with self-referential thinking, with the inner voice. In experienced meditators who report no inner monologue during deep practice, activity in the default mode network drops significantly. The voice goes quiet. And with it, temporarily, goes the sense of a continuous narrating self. This does not mean the self disappears. It means the self, as we normally experience it, is partly a product of inner speech. Remove the speech and the experience of selfhood changes in ways that are genuinely difficult to describe. So here is where we have arrived. You started this video with a voice in your head. A voice so familiar it felt like the most basic, obvious part of you. And what the research shows is something stranger and more interesting than that. The voice is real, but it is not the author of your experience. It is the narrator. It arrived late to decisions already made. It was built from language absorbed from other people. It can be silenced. And when it is, something remains. Something that was there before the first word you ever learned, before the first voice you ever internalized. What that something is. Science has a name for it, but the name doesn't quite capture it. Consciousness researchers call it pure awareness. The substrate on which all experience, including the inner voice, appears. The voice in your head is not you. It is the story you've been telling yourself about who you are. And the most unsettling part, the part that stays with you after this video ends, is that you've been believing that story your entire life, without ever questioning who was telling it. Maybe the more important question isn't whose voice is in your head. Maybe the more important question is, who is the one listening? See you next time.